The Galactic Council chambers hummed with a tension thick enough to taste. High Chancellor Valeris, his Lithian features etched with concern, addressed the assembly. "We convene today under a shadow of great gravity. The Corthan Dominion, in a flagrant violation of the Pax Galactica, has launched an unprovoked assault on a pre-contact, pre-FTL civilization. Their target, a world designated Sol 3, known to its inhabitants as Earth." A wave of murmurs rippled through the delegates. Attacking a non-spacefaring race was the ultimate taboo, a crime so heinous it hadn't been committed in millennia. The Corthans were known for their arrogance and brutality, but this was a new low. The Corthan ambassador, a hulking four-armed brute named Grohl, sneered from his designated pod. The world was rich in resources we required. The primitives inhabiting it were an obstacle, nothing more. By now, their resistance has been crushed, and their world is ours. What will you do, Council? Impose sanctions? We will weather them. Chancellor Valeris's gaze hardened. Your confidence is misplaced, Ambassador. We have been monitoring the situation. Your initial assault fleet consisted of 50 battlecruisers and 100 frigates, a force capable of pacifying a dozen star systems. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. Reports from our long-range observatories are confusing. Grohl let out a booming laugh. Confusing? I'm sure they are. The humans, as they call themselves, are probably so terrified they don't know which way to run. Our glorious Dominion fleet is delivering swift subjugation. On the contrary, Valeris said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. We lost contact with your fleet exactly 72 standard hours after they entered the Sol system. Before communications ceased, the fleet commander's last transmission was chaotic. It consisted of a single word, repeated over and over. A hush fell over the chamber. Every eye was on the Chancellor. Demons, Valerius revealed. The last word we heard was demons. Grohl's sneer faltered. Impossible. A trick. Our warships are invincible against primitives with chemical rockets and projectile weapons. That's what we thought. A new voice cut in. It was Xylia, the Cygnian delegate, her avian features sharp with intelligence. She activated a holographic display in the center of the room. It shimmered to life, showing a grainy, chaotic image. It was a view from the bridge of a Corthan battlecruiser. Alarms blared silently. Explosions rocked the vessel. Corthan warriors, bred for combat, were screaming in terror, firing their plasma rifles wildly into the corridors. What is that? Someone whispered. The image zoomed in. Figures swarmed the Corthan ship. They were smaller, bipedal, and clad in bulky armored suits of a dull, non-reflective material. They moved with a terrifying speed and efficiency, not like soldiers, but like predators. They weren't using energy weapons. Instead, they carried strange devices that spat streams of solid projectiles at hypersonic speeds, tearing through Corthan armor and flesh with horrifying ease. Others wielded what looked like primitive blades, superheated to a white-hot glow, carving through blast doors as if they were paper. Grohl stared, his 4 hands clenched. What sorcery is this? Who are they? They are the defenders of Earth, Xylia stated. We intercepted their internal communications. They call these units Marines. Another scene flashed onto the display. A Corthan frigate drifted in space, its hull breached. But it wasn't a clean plasma burn. It was ripped, torn apart by a colossal force. Then the footage showed how. A human vessel, far smaller than the frigate, had latched onto its hull. It wasn't a warship. It looked more like a modified freighter, clunky and asymmetrical. But from its bow extended a massive metallic arm ending in a multi-fingered claw. This claw had literally torn the Corthan ship open. Human soldiers poured through the breach. The council watched in stunned silence as the so-called primitives dismantled the modern warship with what looked like repurposed industrial equipment. Their space combat doctrine is unconventional, Valerius murmured, stating the obvious. They don't engage from a distance. They close the gap, latch on, and board. They treat starships like old sea vessels, engaging in close-quarters combat inside the very ships they're attacking. The Corthan fleet was prepared for energy duels between fleets, not for a boarding action on this scale. The display shifted again, this time to the surface of Earth. Corthan ground troops, behemoths in gleaming battle armor, were shown advancing through a ruined city. They expected to be met with disorganized militia. Instead, they faced something else entirely. Small, agile human vehicles, some on wheels, some on tracks, darted through the rubble, firing missiles that seemed to ignore Corthan energy shields, impacting with pure kinetic fury. Human soldiers, using the ruins for cover, coordinated their fire with terrifying precision. They didn't break. They didn't rout. When a position was about to be overrun, they wouldn't retreat. The footage showed a squad of human soldiers, trapped and outnumbered, detonating their own position, taking a dozen Corthan elites with them. Their disregard for self-preservation is absolute, Xylia commented, her voice strained. We've analyzed their history. It's filled with millennia of constant, brutal warfare. Not against other species, but against themselves. They have honed the art of killing to a level we have never encountered. Every tactic the Corthans used, the humans had a counter for, often a more brutal and effective one. They seemed to view this invasion not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. They call it a target-rich environment. The final piece of data filled the screen. It was an astronomical chart of the Sol system. 50 red dots, representing the Corthan fleet, had entered. Now there were none. Instead, there were thousands of smaller signatures swarming from Earth and its moon. They were misshapen, crude, but they were fast, and they were numerous. They've reverse-engineered your technology, Ambassador Grohl, Valerius said, his voice cold as the void. In less than 3 days. They took your ships, tore them apart, and built their own. They're not just on the defensive anymore. They're building a fleet. And judging by the energy signatures we're detecting, they've figured out your FTL drives. A deep collective shudder went through the Galactic Council. The primitives who were supposed to be a footnote in the Dominion's glorious history had not only repelled the invasion, they had consumed it. They had turned the wolves into sheep and were now wearing their skins. Ambassador Grohl was silent, his bravado gone, replaced by a primal fear he hadn't felt in his life. He was staring at the screen, at the swarm of new ships leaving Earth's orbit, their trajectories pointing outward, toward the wider galaxy. Chancellor Valerius looked at the Corthan ambassador, then at the horrified faces of the council members. He leaned into his microphone, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. We came here today to discuss the crime of attacking a primitive world, he said, his voice trembling slightly. But I fear we are now faced with a much, much greater problem. We were worried about what the Corthan Dominion had done to Earth. He paused, taking a shaky breath. Now, we must worry about what Earth is about to do to the Corthan Dominion, and to the rest of us. The galaxy had been a predictable place, governed by rules and treaties. But a new player had just entered the game. A player that had been forged in the crucible of constant self-destruction. A player that didn't know the rules and wouldn't care for them if they did. The age of the Pax Galactica was over. The age of humanity had just begun. And the galaxy was not ready. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next dive into the universe. See you next time.